started. I call this regular David Douglas School Board meeting today, January 9th at 7 p.m. Happy New Year, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. I'm going to start us off, as we always do, with a Native American land acknowledgement. Today, I would like to acknowledge the people whose land we are gathered on. Present-day Portland is located on the traditional village sites of the Multnomah, Wasco, Cowlitz, Cathlamet, Clackamas, bands of Chinook, Tualatin, Kalapuya, Malala, and many other tribes who made their homes along the Columbia and Willamette rivers. Let us also acknowledge the robust Native community made up of tribal diversity that originates from around the country and whose journeys have brought them to Portland by ways of forced displacement or seeking opportunities. Today, these same communities celebrate their heritage, showing resilience and tenacity that would be greatly admired by their ancestors. I also just wanted to take a moment to recognize that we had a student pass recently. I wanted to share our sincere condolences as the board to the friends and family of this individual. And also wanted to share that we have various resources, not only with our individual student counselors, but also on our website, and encourage folks to reach out to those resources and to those who they feel comfortable with. So I will turn it over to the student body report. Thanks so much for joining us again, Jared.
Good evening. Well, Happy New Year again. And about what's going on in the school, at least from, I think right now Student Council's big project, just from Student Council, is we're starting more on the fundraising for our Scott's Angels, which is really awesome. Everyone in Student Council is assigned to get a donation from a company, whether that be local or a big corporation or something, but get a donation for our lottery, like raffle tickets that we're gonna sell soon. And that's last year we earned like a bunch of money for that, and then hopefully this year I'm probably gonna sell to all of you guys. And so that's something that we're working on. Also, just on Student Council level, like right now we're close to finals, so that's a real stressful time for everyone. Right now the lower classmen, their final for Student Council is to create SMART goals and practice goal setting, which is really cool. And then for the upperclassmen, we're creating vision boards, which is interesting. Not something I've done before, so a new experience. And then that's kind of like a little bit from what student government is up to.
Thank you. As always, you're more than welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting, or you can head out whenever you need to. So we have the attendee input next. Were you able to grab the attendee input list? Oh, someone is signing up. All right, great. I'll just take a couple minutes there. Thank you. Lots of folks today. All right, so let me see. I'm just looking through all of this. So we usually try to prioritize students, but I'm not seeing anyone specifically identified as a student. But we do have someone who did identify as a resident, so I'll start with that person, Silka Ackerson. Come on up. If you don't mind waiting, then that's fine. Okay, great. So we'll start with Mike Ewald. Come on up.
Okay, to put yourself in a position to where we have school board boundaries as far as individual positions, and the reason I say that, we don't need all of our school board members coming from top of the hill or from the Menlo Park area. Be nice if we had a representation from all over the school district. That would be a challenge. The other would be term limits. Enough said. I would like to get a hard copy of school board policies, family restrooms, or a co-ed restroom. Mr. Richardson and Ms. Wallace know what I'm talking about for myself personally, but you guys can talk about that later. And then the one thing that I recently saw is our security cameras. We need to have we need to have an expert come in and kind of reposition some of those. Apparently there's only one camera that watches the 135th parking lot, I believe. And if the trees are in full bloom, you're not seeing anything. So I would suggest that we maybe revamp some of our security systems. With that said, I'll leave you again. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. See you next month.
Thank you. So the next person we have is Hamdi Ali. Come on up. Thanks so much for joining us.
So we were just going to introduce our organization to you all. A few of you guys are familiar with ICO, African Youth and Community Organization, and we just wanted to let you know what we're doing in the schools. We plan to present at the next board meeting, and so Ahmed, who works as a culture navigator here, is kind of going to give you guys a rundown of what we've been doing so far.
Hi guys, my name is Ahmed. So at ICO, we mostly deal with refugees and immigrant and youths since 2009, and then we're able to connect the youth and in mentorship in schools, especially in Dave Douglas for this year. Also after school programs like homework help. Also like field trips. We also have some other events on we're able to connect with the parents and be able to have a meeting with the principals and the parents so that we could have figured out what's going on with the youth and the parents so that they can have a better relationship, because mostly the youth that we really work with have a language barrier. So that's why me and my couple of my coworkers here in school couple days of the week so that we could help those youths in whenever they need us.
I just wanted to say thank you all for being supportive of our organization, and thank you to Ken Richardson and Sahar and Stephanie. I know a few of you all, and Rolando was super helpful and made our process into this high school real super easy, and we're just looking forward to continuing our partnership with David Douglas. And we'll be here next month and presenting more about our organization. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so next we have Israel T. and David H. Come on up. Yeah, I think, yeah. You can bring some chairs too, or, yeah, whatever you need to do.
So, my name's Israel Timothy. My name's Samuel Timothy. My name's Ahmed News. My name is Emmanuel Congo. My name is Amin Dogo. My name is Reese Montgomery.
My name is Brian Odom.
Our mission statement for REAP is to practically elevate, ignite, elevate, that's our introduction. So, all right.
Thank you. That's amazing. We certainly always love having students in these meetings, so thank you so much. I'm just going to run down the list just to make sure that I didn't miss anybody, but I think all of you just stood up and I wasn't able to hear everyone's name, so I just want to make sure I didn't miss anyone. But there was Amin D. That was everybody. Okay, great. So then the last person that we have is Silka. Come on up. Silka Ackerson.
Nice to see you all. My name is Silka Akerson. I'm a mother with a student at Floyd Light Middle School, and I haven't been able to come to a board meeting for a long time because I have class almost every Thursday night these days. And it's really nice to see the board changing and starting to represent the district more. It's really heartening to be here, and I'm so excited that the work that the equity committee has been doing is coming back to the board and in process now. And in some ways, the thing that I want to talk to you about seems small in comparison to that, but it's actually really important to me. And those of you who've been on the board for a while have heard me talk about it before, but I'm back again to talk about school start time. I know that it seems just like a logistical nuisance to move school start time around, but as a healthcare provider, I really want the structures that our kids are learning in to actually reflect their developmental needs. And the way that we have our start time set up right now is actually opposite. The elementary school starts the latest and the high school starts the earliest, and we know really clearly that that's not how children sleep, and it's not what works for them physiologically. The American Academy of Pediatrics has been extremely clear that high schools, their recommendation is that high schools don't start before 8:30 a.m. And I don't know if you all know when our high school starts, but the first period starts at 7:40 a.m. And we've been down the road before of the district doing some research about changing the start times for the elementary, middle school, high school. And I think we got off to a really poor start. I don't need to go over the details of that again, but I'm just coming back to say I actually think this is important and can make a difference for our students. There's really clear evidence that insufficient sleep in adolescence not only affects their academic performance, but also physical and mental health issues and risk-taking behaviors such as vehicle accidents and alcohol and drug use. So I actually think it's structurally important, and I would love it if the board would consider having a small committee of parents look at this and study if there are some options that don't compromise the needs of elementary school students, but actually take into account the needs of all of the age groups of students. I know I don't have much time, but one thing that I did is that I looked at the start times for the other small districts to the east of Portland Public Schools. And it seems like, this is an issue for small districts with small bus fleets. That's always troublesome because it's hard to figure out how to get buses to all of the schools when you're working with one fleet like that. But there are some solutions that other districts have come up with that look like they meet the needs of students more. And I think that there are solutions that we could create if there were actually parents of all ages of kids thinking about this together with the district. So I know the last time I brought it back to the board, it was kind of shut down, and I know structural change is hard. I know people are afraid of change, but I actually think this would be a change that would be supportive of the academic and physical and mental well-being of our students, and I would really love to have an opportunity to keep working on it in a way that actually meets the needs of parents, the schools, and the children. Thank you.
Thank you. Awesome. Those were all of the attendee input for this evening. Thanks everyone for taking the time to share your thoughts in front of us. So the next item that we have is a board book presentation, and this will be given by Hal Frazier. And it looks like it's going to have some sort of a media file here. WebEx.
He's presenting virtually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's right.
He's in California.
Okay. Let's just take a couple minutes here. And just a reminder, refresher here. So the presentation will be about BoardBook, which is a potential new software for our board materials, which we currently still receive on paper. Thank you. Thanks so much. Good luck.
Please enter your conference code now. We're connecting you to your conference, which is already in progress. There is one other party on the call at this time. You are joining the call as a guest. You may touch #0 at any time for conference help.
Good evening. This is Hal at BoardBook.
Hi, Hal. This is David Douglas, School Board. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Welcome. Yes, we can. Thanks so much for joining us.
Okay. Mhm.
We're all ready when you are.
Oh, okay, okay. Just
You're up.
yeah, I didn't realize that. Y'all just threw me on stage. Okay. Let me ask you just a really quick question, and I realize that we're in a board meeting. How long do I have?
We technically have you on the
Okay, that'll work. Okay, well let me go ahead and jump into it then. What you're seeing before you is the brand new revamped board book. Okay, we're calling it BoardBook Premier. So there are a few more bells and whistles that go along with BoardBook than maybe what you have seen once upon a time. Has anybody seen BoardBook before? No. No. Okay. Okay. This is all going to be new. And just to let you know, I'm using a demonstration account, and they I know just enough to be dangerous. Okay. Okay. With that said, let's go ahead and get in there. And I'm actually gonna show both sides really quickly. So when I say both sides, I'm gonna put together an agenda, add a little bit of documentation, and then I'm gonna release the information and show you what you as the board would actually see. Sound good? Okay. Let me go ahead and I'm logging in as what you would call an agenda manager. And the agenda manager is just, again, the person that's going to be putting all of the information together. And when you first log in, make sure I have the right password. When you first log in as the agenda manager, this is the first page that you're going to come to. And again, this is the person putting everything together. You actually, in order to put together an agenda and add documentation, it's really just very much in a few clicks. Everything is going to start up there where it says create new meeting. Okay, everything's going to start there. Now, within Premiere, it's very granular. There are a lot of different things you can do within the program. But like I said, when I go through this, I'm only going to really show two statuses. One called in development, and that's where I'm putting everything together. And then I'm going to switch the status to in review and then send an email out to a board member. But when I click on create new meeting, it opens up, as you can see, where it says the create meeting page. And up there at the top where it says create from template, What typically happens when you first get set up with BoardBook is our implementation specialists are going to say, hey, are there meetings that you use and you reuse all the time? More than likely, you're going to say, yeah, a lot of our meetings overlap. We might have the same items for several different meetings. And what they're going to do is they're going to create templates for you so that you can pull from that information so that you're not always having to start from scratch. So that when you do come out here and you create the new meeting, you're just going to select the template that you want to use. And I'm just going to select one really quickly. I'm just going to grab regular meeting of the board. You have your meeting types that are here. You can actually designate those behind the scenes, and they would actually get those set up for you. But I just have these, I think 7 or 8 right here. I'm just going to choose regular. Put in your meeting title. And then just to kind of speak a little bit to the granularity of BoardBook Premier, your meetings, you can actually designate when you have your regular meetings. Okay, so if you have a meeting every first Thursday of every month or something like that, or every third Wednesday, you can actually designate that behind the scenes so that when you're creating this meeting, your meeting date will already be populated for you. I'm just going to select something real quick. So let me grab, let's say we're going to have a meeting on the 21st. You can designate your time ahead of time if you want to as well. And within BoardBook Premier, you can actually set different meeting locations because, as we all know, meeting locations change from time to time. So you could, plug in a bunch of different meeting locations. And I'm just going to select one from the drop down. And once you have that little bit of information that's in here, these first 6 things, you're pretty much done. Now, down here toward the bottom, of course, you can add notes to the meeting or the reason that you're having the meeting or any type of posting information. When I scroll down a little further, you see where it says meeting header. This is what your board would actually see. BoardBook meeting preparation. It could have a logo on there, whatever you'd want them to see. You can also have a footer at the end of the meeting as well. And down here at the bottom where it says save and add, I'm just going to go ahead and click that. And what it's doing now is it's creating the agenda. And it actually pulled all of those items from the meeting, as you can see, from the template. And you see all the information that's there. So this is your entire agenda already created. Now keep in mind, you can start from scratch if you want to. You can even copy from a different meeting. I know I had that question today. Somebody asked, well, hey, there's one particular meeting that we have every year where we have to use the same information. You can actually copy from that meeting by selecting a template. So you are able to do that. Now, once you have your agenda created here, you can add documents, and there are several ways to actually add attachments. There are actually 2 different ways. Now, the way that I like the best is if I click on attach documents right here, it just opens up another page. And now I can just select where I would want those attachments to go as far as, under which items. So if I go down here, I'm just going to grab, let's say, district learning goals here. If you have 2 monitors, you can drag and drop your attachments in this box. I'm kind of old-fashioned, so I always like to use, open the file browser up. And let's just grab a few things real quick. And you can actually grab several documents and drop those all at once. I know in the older version of BoardBook, you had to grab attachments one at a time. So let's grab a few things here. Just going to grab those 2 things. Oops, I'm sorry. I didn't grab the other one. Okay, and I'm going to click open. The learning goals is a little bit larger, and forgive my slow computer. I'm actually working at the house right now, so okay. Once you have the attachments pulled in, there are several things that you can do with these attachments. With these 2 documents, you see over here where it says anyone with a login within BoardBook Premier, you can actually specify based on a person's access who needs to see this information. Okay, so when I use this drop down where it says anyone with a login, you see the people that are in here, your agenda manager, voting members are your board members, attorneys, the public. It's set for anyone with a login, but it's really going to be left up to you based on whoever you give access to who needs to see information. So if you had this only set for, let's say, voting members, and let's say the public needed to see it, wouldn't be able to see the information because you didn't allow that. The other drop down that's down here that says allow downloads, we do have a few customers who they don't want their board members to download certain pieces of information from the program. Doesn't stop anybody from taking a picture with their phone or doing a screenshot or anything like that, but they wouldn't be able to pull the information from the program itself. So right now it's set to allow downloads, but if you had a piece of documentation that you said, you know what, they only need to be able to see this displayed within the PDF viewer, you can specify that as well. Let's grab a couple of, I'm just going to grab a few more things, and then we'll move on from there. I'm just going to make this a little bit larger than it is. So let's grab this, and let's grab that. Okay. Let's pull those in there. Now, once you've pulled in your documentation, if I click back to the agenda, and I click attachments over here under view options, scroll down, you can see where my attachments are. That's just one way to pull in attachments. Another way that you can do that is if I actually open up the item itself, I can actually drop things in that way as well. If I click on, let's say, public comment, that takes me inside of the item. And then if I scroll down, you see I can drag and drop attachments here as well. It's just another way to actually do it. A couple more things I just wanted to show you really quickly before I actually switch over to the board side. You can actually drag and drop your items as well. There are actually two ways to do that also. Just like with documents, there are two ways that you can reorder your agenda items. Over here, this blue button that says reorder, when I click on it, you see the arrows that are there. I can move things around, drag things up, drop them off. It's just going to renumber everything for you. Take new business, let's move it up a bit somewhere else as well. As you can see, I did right there. Then I can just click Save New Agenda Item Order. And just to let you know, items can become sub-items, and sub-items can become items. Once I click Save, you see everything's updated. That's one way that I can reorder things. If I wanted to reposition something, you saw a minute ago, I just clicked into the item. Let's say I click into call to order. Now, nobody would ever do this because call to order is usually the first thing, but over here on the right-hand side, you see I can reposition it. Okay, so the other is more of the drag and drop. This is more repositioning. So if I wanted to say, you know what, I want call to order to be underneath public comment or something like that, and I select that, it tells you, hey, this agenda item is going to appear here. If I click and save that item, you see now call to order is now under public comment. So that's just a few ways. Like I said, just kind of wanted to show you guys how you could move information around, how you could create your agenda, add your documentation. Once you have everything, once the agenda manager has everything the way that they want it to look, you could change the status. Like right now, everything's in development, meaning that you're creating everything. And as the agenda manager, nobody else can see this information just yet except for you. But once I put things in review, I'm going to go up here to meetings, go to meetings, minutes, and agendas. You see up there at the top, this is the meeting that I just created from January 21st. The meeting status shows in development. Once I select in review, now I can notify my board members that, hey, there's a packet that's out there, or I'm sorry, there's a meeting that's out there that you can take a look at now, and click notify. And this is how you would email your board members. Now, again, I told you guys that they gave me just enough to be dangerous. These board members 1 through 5, I don't know where that stuff goes, but I am able to send this to myself. So, my name's checked off. There's my email subject, which I can change if I wanted to. There's my meeting notification. Down here at the bottom, it just says send email. Once I send that email out, they're saying sent by me to me, and hopefully it'll pop through real quick, and then I'll go ahead and just switch over to the board side. How am I doing on time? Not bad. Okay. Let me look at my email and see if it's come through. Yeah, there it is. I just saw it pop in. Okay. Let me log out of here as the agenda manager. Yeah, there we go. And I'm actually going to get out of that tab. And I'm going to go over here. The meeting has been created. Here's a meeting notification. Here's the link. This link is specific to this meeting. So as a board member, when I click on the link, I can log in from here. And when I log in, it's going to take me immediately to that meeting. And here's the meeting. Now, of course, I made it very simple so you don't see a whole lot of like written text or anything like this, but this is the entire meeting agenda. When you look over to the left-hand side, and then you see like where it says district learning goals here, you see a little page that's there that lets you know that there's supporting documentation under that particular item. So if I click on it, those attachments do pop up. And then if I want to take a look at something, let's look at the, let's say, board highlights. It'll load the document up. And within Board Book Premier, as opposed to our old version of Board Book, you can now take notes within the solution. You don't have to download anything onto your device. You can just do everything from here. So if I wanted to take a note on this document, I can click, sticky note. Lets me know that there's a note that's right there. If I wanted to take a note on, let's say, one of the items, let's see, RFP for new auditing service, and I click add note here. Keep in mind, this is the board member's own personal notes. So nobody else would be able to see this, and you can actually search to look for your notes, but your note will always be here. And you notice that when I took that note where it says RFP for new auditing service, another little page pops up that lets you know that there's information here. Just a couple of other things I want to show really quickly before we actually go to any questions or anything. As far as the board side, there's really not a lot to it, but up here at the top, where it says follow the leader, like you see this button that's right here. Follow the leader essentially means this: if you have somebody that's leading the meeting, okay, let's say that the agenda manager can also lead the meeting, or you might have somebody with just that access, okay? Maybe it's board secretary or whoever's running it. On their particular screen, there's a button that says lead. When they click that button that says that they're leading the meeting, if you as a board member click follow the leader, wherever they go on the screen, you wouldn't have to touch anything. You could essentially kick back if you wanted to, put your feet up on the dais. Hopefully you guys don't do that, but you could, and just kind of follow along with whatever is going on in the meeting. And this goes from, any documents that are opened by the leader, just anywhere they go within the meeting agenda, you would actually follow along. And you could always click off of follow the leader as well if you wanted to take a note, take a note somewhere on another item. But whenever you click back on following, it'll take you right back to where they are. The same thing here with raise hand. Let's say that it's a large board meeting room. Let's say the dais is really long, and let's say you have a board member that's on the end. They may not speak up as much. They can actually click raise hand, and it'll pop up on everyone's screen that says, hey, Hal just raised his hand. Let's go ahead and recognize that person. I'm trying to think if I'm forgetting anything. I don't think I am. Another thing too, within Board Book Premier, and in fact, let me just show it to you really quickly. I'm going to log out of here as a board member. You are able to, I'm going to log back in as the agenda manager. You are able to take attendance as well, and you are able to vote electronically also. Just want to kind of show you what that looks like. So let's go to that meeting on January 21st. Let's just go into the meeting. Let's join it. And you see my settings that are up there. You see where it says attendance. So let's say that we're under the district learning goals, and I want to take attendance here. When I click on that attendance record, I can say, you know what, board member number 1 was absent during this particular time. 4 was absent as well. And it also date and time stamps it for you. You can save that record. And then if you want to take notes, you see up there where it says take action. If I click on that, you may already have motions that you've already, that maybe your minutes manager or somebody has already added to the meeting, or, you know, if you just want to, if you want to make a motion right then. Pick up something real quick. And then over here on the right-hand side, you could just take the vote. So let's say Hal made the motion. Do we need to have a meeting? Board member number 3 seconded, and then board member number 2 said no. And then it keeps track of the results for you. And all of the information, anytime you take attendance or anytime you take a vote, any discussions, motions, anything like that is added to a minutes report. And you might have somebody that's designated as the minutes manager. That's their main function. All this information is already added for them, so they're not having to do it, you know, type it out themselves. It'll print out on the report at the end once everybody's done. Questions?
Thank you so much.
Hal, I don't know, well, I don't have a question, and if it's going to take some time, I want to keep to the agenda, but is there any way you can show what the public sees from the agenda side of it and how things are archived? And again, I don't know if you have that queued up or can show it without too much work, but I think our board might be interested in to see how it gets posted, and then, you know, the tracking. 6 months from now, all the agendas are still there, et cetera, et cetera?
I can show you based on, you know what? I think I do have an example. Let me see if I can find it, of what it would actually look like. I don't have it based on board book, and you know what? That's an excellent, and this is totally my fault. This is this is what it would is actually going to look like on your side. So, this is what it would look like. This is what all the meetings would look like. Now, what I'm showing you is based on, the public view is essentially just a link. We give you the link, you add it to your website. Once you've added it to your website, up there at the top, it would say Board Book Premier, and then it's going to look like this. So if we want to take a look at one of the agendas, this is what they would actually see.
Perfect. That's what I was talking about. Thank you.
Yeah. Great question.
Other questions?
Audience members, while we're taking votes?
Yes. Yes. There is a public projector. I don't have access. It's a setting. But the answer is yes, there is a public projector. Once something is published, you know, I just showed you the first two statuses. I showed you development and then review, but the very next status is published. Once something is published, it activates that public viewer. And so all you would need to do when you actually get into a meeting, if you want to, show the public what was going on in the meeting, you would click on that public viewer, and they'd be able to see it up on a screen if you had it up.
Any other questions?
Just one.
It's a yearly subscription, and we actually work with one of our partners is OSBA, and so let's just say, for the sake of argument, you said, "Hey, yeah, we like Board Book Premier. We want to use it." We'll get in contact with them, and they'll send you the contract and everything that you need. But yes, it would be yearly.
I have a couple of questions. So for going back to the public view from the school district website on the agendas, something that is really important to us here in David Douglas is that we have multiple languages spoken in our district. So I'm curious about the potential to link the agendas in various languages. So we have like an English version, for an example, and then Spanish and or Cantonese, let's say. Would that be possible?
Talk to me a little bit more about that. Like, how do you do that right now, currently?
We don't necessarily as much as we would like. Oh, the agenda we do. Okay, yeah. So we have, I think, how it is. I thought that was just for items, so that's helpful. So we have like an English agenda. And then right next to it, we'll say agenda Spanish version or agenda Chinese version, right? Is that like what it's labeled so that people are able to click on the version that they can read?
Okay. You know what? Let me find out.
Okay.
I don't know right off. It's funny that you mentioned that because it came up not too long ago, but then I haven't heard much about it from there. But I want to know how it could be done within the system. Yeah, let me find out. That's a great question.
Okay. And then the other question that I had was, say we have an agenda item that we know we want to put in front of the board, but we don't necessarily know a date. So it could be like X agenda item for date TBD. Are we able to save that somewhere on the software to pick back up and add to an agenda later? Or do the agenda items have to be for a specific date that has already been made?
So if you have a particular item, it would be, I guess, like queued up or something.
Right. Can you queue it up
So it's
for a later date?
like it's never been used. Or are you saying, can we create meetings for future dates? I don't think I'm understanding.
Yeah, I think my question is, can we create agenda items for future dates,
Systems
but not
by themselves.
correct?
Oh, but not associate them with anything yet. That I'm not sure, and I'm only saying that because I've never heard of that. And I'm just talking about within either our old solution or the new one, to where it wasn't associated with a meeting. It was just an item that just happened to be within the software somewhere.
Yeah,
That's a good question. Let me see.
curious. Okay,
Okay.
that's all that I had. Thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate all this information. It's really helpful.
Oh, anytime. If any questions come up, let's see. Laura, you're in the room, right? Yes, I am. Okay. I will get these answers to you. And then if any questions come up after this, just let me know. All right, thank you all.
So just quick follow-up so the entire board knows. It's something, basically it's a paperless board agenda system. I think we all got that in the process. And really the reason we're looking at it is not necessarily all the bells and whistles, although the board might be interested. It's really more for the agenda development and for efficiencies of Lori, right? I mean, you guys all know right now it's all done by hand. She's literally delivering them by hand. We're trying to get out of that system a little bit and get into the electronic system a bit. I don't know how interested you are in using all the other bells and whistles. We literally, if the board was open to us going that direction, we could have OSBA come and train. You know, it doesn't have to in one of our workshop dates. But what we wanted to do is look at the possibility of moving this direction, mostly so we get out of the old hand agenda development and more of electronic agenda development for the efficiency of our board secretary ultimately. Yes.
So one thing that was, besides saving your time, which is money, let's face it, I mean, we're paying a salary here. It doesn't have to be like driving around town delivering agendas. I really like the idea that we can have the documents that come in our agenda and the documents that we see in front of us and presentations available quickly on a public site that others in the room can follow. Because we've heard again and again, like we're looking at documents that people that are following along either on Facebook or YouTube or here in our community don't see, right? So to me, there's also the efficacy of getting those out really quickly by clicking a button to the public when they can be, right? Board policies that we're going to be reviewing, others can look at and give us feedback at the meeting if they need to or in writing. So I think just in terms of transparency and accountability, this is great, as well as the finances of saving your time and our district's money.
Anyone else? Go ahead.
I guess that'd just be really interesting to hear what Lori thinks of this whole program, since you're the one who's going to be having to kind of like pivot and do something a little different as far as creating the agenda and putting all this together.
I actually did one of the WebExes by myself and got really into it, and I thought it was wonderful. I mean, especially to have it be online for the public to go back and view past board meetings, because right now I'm pulling the entire packet off to put the new packet on because we don't have room to keep all the packets. And this program keeps them on there. So you can go back to any date and look up any report, document, agenda. So I think it's a really great system.
I have a question. So my understanding of all this is this is in BoardBooks Cloud, right? So at some point in the future, if we chose to go with a different vendor or put them on Google Drive or whatever, then do they have a mechanism for us to archive all of our meeting information, old meeting information, like draw it down and archive it on our servers in the district so that we can kind of like keep it forever if we wanted?
I still save a packet, just so you know that. I have a big fireproof filing cabinet that I keep a paper packet in there. That way it goes back many, many years.
Okay.
So we always
you'd still
have
print a copy and
yes,
stick it in.
yes,
Okay.
one copy to save. But I mean, I don't know if you could.
So ultimately, the material's ours, right? I mean, at some
yeah.
point, if we severed contract, they may be sorry. But could we go through a process to get some sort of zip PDF file that here's
Okay.
all ours? How do we upload it, or is it a separate? How we would transition that with a new, I couldn't speak to.
Yeah.
But yeah, we would have an electronic file in some shape or form. Might turn into a whole bunch of, here's the new program, nice and fancy, and here's all the PDFs with dates by it or something like
Okay.
that. But yeah.
Okay.
So.
I've got just a comment.
Oh, go ahead.
As a person who tried to get us to go electronic 10 years ago, it's kind of nice to have a group of board members who are willing to do it.
You're like so relieved right now.
It just kind of went down the tube with some of the board members who refused to work this way.
Well, thank you for getting the ball rolling, even though it was slow process.
So we will continue to explore. Basically, we just wanted to make sure there was no hard nose, right? And absolutely, we don't want to. So moving forward, what we can do is make sure we get these questions answered. I'd be interested in even maybe trying it, seeing if they could pilot with 1 month, let them try it. There's a lot of different things we can talk about as well, and we can slow play it out. What Frida's alluding to, there was a time where there was a computer sitting in front of our board members as they showed up, right? And back then, the laptops at the time maybe weren't the most reliable, but nowadays we could possibly have a Chromebook at each one of your stations with the board book ready there. You come sit down, click on it. Obviously, you'd have your own access with your own devices as well, but for each meeting, there it is, there it goes, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of different ways we can move forward with it. But first, let's get the questions answered, and then maybe we'll try to talk about, could we pilot it once and see what they say about that, and then we can go from there, if you're okay with that.
Yeah, that's great.
I had being on the ESD budget committee last year, I wasn't given a budget. I came and had a Chrome computer there. They had it queued up for the budget, and that's all. Everything was online.
That's amazing. Yeah,
So.
that's great. Yeah, that's great. I mean, I think it's definitely something that would be exciting for us to transition to. I would, to be quite honest, be really concerned if they weren't able to accommodate the translated agendas. Just because, you know, I think a particular goal of mine in this is to increase accessibility. So I would just be concerned about how we could supplement that to make sure that we're still reaching the communities in our district who are English language learners or speak other languages in general. And then I would also be curious, I didn't ask him, but in this conversation thought around how this would integrate with our Google Drive and just kind of like our email systems, because that's in general kind of how I save a lot of documents. I'm just kind of thinking, you know, it would be ideal to be able to have some sort of integration there if possible. So kind of similar to Christine's question, it's not just on like BoardBook, but it's in a place where I can just access quickly on my phone, and maybe like they have an app or something. I don't know how that works actually. But yeah, I mean, that's great. So thank you all for taking the time to hear that presentation, and we'll keep you posted. Cool. Moving on, and actually, you know, if there are no objections, I'm actually going to move, what is it, item 11 up now before the consent agenda, because this is a short item and an action item, and I do think we might have some folks here excited and eager to hear us talk about that. So, yeah, cool. So if there are no objections, so we'll just jump to item 11. It's board policy, second reading. So you have in front of you, it's policy ACB. And this is actually, so there's technically two items here. It's the policy, and then there's a resolution. And I'll apologize that I think it should be in front of you and not in your packet. Yeah. It should be in here somewhere. Yeah. Oh, you were? Okay. And so we had talked last meeting about slight edits to both predominantly the resolution, and we had talked through edits on the policy. So what you have in front of you is the red line version of those edits that we talked through. There were no other changes that have been made since that conversation. And so I just wanted to give you a couple minutes to just reread, refresh your memory on what we talked about there. And then I'll just stop there. Sure, go ahead.
On the actual policy, number 5, where the language was changed and it says that the district will use a racial equity lens and racial equity analysis. I remember this coming up in our meetings before, about a year ago, and saying that if we're going to use that language of a racial equity lens, we should have an example of it. What we what that is. But there's no direction here as to what that is or who was going to create, like, no direction to create one. So I just wonder how we reconcile that within the policy.
Does the district have a definition that we've identified elsewhere in a previous?
So there's not a formally adopted, but there are racial equity lens. Like there's a document in my office you might have seen behind that talks about racial equity lens. Actually, last time this was brought up and Frida emailed an actual sample from the city, I think. Home for Everyone, I'm sorry. So the question is, we could adopt one, we could bring one, we could question one. I don't know if, Stephanie, you're saying it should be connected to the policy, which, again, it's up to the board. But either way, and or just make note that we would like to see
Well, I think that
samples.
it says, like, the paragraph that's really important to me is the last one of this policy, which talks about developing procedures to implement the policy, including an action plan with clear accountability and metrics. And I feel like, you know, that is a direction, right? That's a direction. Whereas the racial equity lens and analysis, there's no direction to create that. And if we don't have one, I don't know how we can use it to analyze or review our policies, procedures, programs, etc. So I don't know what to do about that. I just know that it came up in our meetings, and I think that if we're going to direct the district to use one, one should exist, or there should be a direction to create one or adopt one.
Can't you just add that into that last paragraph, you know?
Yeah, would it be sufficient to say the district will create or adopt a racial equity lens, et cetera?
I think you could just go in the last paragraph where you're saying including an action plan.
I think that makes sense. Yeah. So I would ask that be added.
Do you have a recommended language?
Yes, I recommend that where it says the superintendent as or designees and or designees are directed to develop procedures to implement this policy, including the development or adoption by the board of a racial equity lens and racial equity analysis, comma, and an action plan with clear accountability and metrics. Thanks.
Do you move? Can you move?
And I move to create that language in the last paragraph.
Is there a second?
Seconded.
Okay.
Are we gonna vote?
Yes, I think I'm just double checking now to make sure I did that right. Okay. All those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so we've added that amendment. Any other changes or edits to everything else looks okay? Okay, all right. Well, then, in that case, can we have a motion to approve David Douglas School District Policy ACB Racial Equity Policy?
Stephanie, you should do it.
Yeah, you should do it. So,
Yeah.
So moved.
is there a second?
Second.
Discussion? I just want to say, I guess, before we take the vote, that I really appreciate everyone's hard work on this. You all have worked incredibly hard for a really long time, not only on the board, but those of you in the community. This is a really big step that we are taking, not only for our students, but for our community who have been really encouraging us and advocating for us to be more intentional and serious about bringing racial equity to the forefront of all of our work. And I think this is just a great first step in making that happen. So I'm really pleased and really honored to be taking this vote and committed to implementing all of the really great recommendations and directions of the policy. Any other comments? All right.
I just want to say how happy I am to be a part of this, and I really appreciate it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
One other item that we have on this item is the resolution. So, as I shared with you all, this is the David Douglas Educational and Racial Equity Resolution. Folks thought that it was a good idea, and I agreed that we should have a resolution to complement the policy. There are two, one, be it resolved, the other, be it further resolved, at the bottom, which were not included in the previous resolution. Those are the only two new, be it further resolved, and I think there was some additional numbers. Were there additional numbers? It already had it on the last one. Okay. All right. So other than that, the be it resolved and the be it further resolved, those are the only changes. And to be quite honest, both of those be it further resolved, I pulled exactly from the policy, which is that last, the superintendent and or designees directed to develop procedures, just to make it clear that here's where we stand. This is what, our district looks like in terms of workforce and student population, and this is the direction, and referencing the policy itself, so that you all take a look at that, make sure it's capturing what we had talked about in the last meeting, and give you all one more opportunity to offer any feedback or edits, and then I can call a vote. Okay? All right. Is there a motion to approve the David Douglas Educational and Racial Equity Resolution?
So moved. I thought these equity policy people would be making motions.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye. Andrea, I think you really should read it, since this is being streamed so that people can
that's a
hear
good
the
idea.
resolution.
My voice is a little hoarse, so forgive me.
Hey, Stephanie, read it.
That's fine. You're like, all those times I read those heritage proclamations. Okay. I know, right? Awesome. Okay. Just now recently approved Multnomah County School District Number 40 David Douglas Educational and Racial Equity Resolution. A resolution affirming the David Douglas School District's educational and racial equity work and directing all district staff to use the available tools to assist in the elimination of racial and social disparities per the school board racial equity policy and educational equity policy. Expand the collective work of all staff members to include greater accountability and community-wide efforts to achieve racial equity in our district and schools. Whereas 78.6% of students of color in the 2018-2019 four-year cohort graduated, a lower percentage than the all-student cohort average percentage of 78.9. Excuse me. And whereas 65% of enrolled students are students of color, and these populations increased 13 percentage points over the past 10 years. And whereas 17.46% of the David Douglas School District workforce has self-identified as staff of color and has increased 6.18 percentage points over the past 5 years. And whereas the David Douglas School District Strategic Hiring Plan outlines a goal to increase staff of color by 10% by 2020 so that the district staff more accurately reflect the student population, and district leadership has prioritized representation of the David Douglas School District community in leadership positions, both employee and board. And whereas the David Douglas School District will analyze all data to distinguish data of student groups of color to determine progress towards improvement and differences in outcomes, and monitor any historical patterns or trends that impact racially marginalized student groups of color. And whereas in 2017, the school board created a racial equity subcommittee with the vision of achieving racial equity in the community and the mission of ending institutionalized racism in our district and schools promoting inclusion and full participation of all district staff, and partnering with our families and community to achieve racial equity across the David Douglas School District. And whereas the school board passed an updated educational equity policy on May 12th, 2016, and an inclusion resolution on February 23rd, 2017, recognized 5 equity-based proclamations to avow the ongoing work and efforts centered on equity and inclusion. And whereas education of and leadership by all district staff is mandatory to achieve racial equity in our community, all district staff must work in collaboration with other stakeholders and racial equity experts within our educational community. And whereas equity is a cornerstone of a thriving democracy and the internal actions of local schools contribute to the health and well-being of everyone in our community. Be it resolved that the superintendent and/or designees are directed to develop procedures to implement the David Douglas School District's Racial Equity Policy, ACB, including an action plan with clear accountability and metrics. And be it further resolved that the David Douglas School District is implementing its first ever racial equity policy, Policy ACB, and at least quarterly, the school board will be given a report on the progress towards achieving the objectives of Policy ACB and on the progress of the action plan. The report shall be based on the objectives set by the district team, superintendent, and the school board. Yay. Awesome. All right, moving on. The next item we have is our consent agenda. Do we have a motion?
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
All right. All those in discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. Thank you. Moving on. Superintendent's report.
You bet. Kind of important vote you guys just took, huh? And I get to follow that. Wow. I do want to start by saying Happy New Year to our entire board. I know I got to say it a little earlier, but to our community as well, and anyone who might be on TV. Very excited to be back. Very excited to see our kids in schools, our staff in schools, and just continue to move forward to do the best we can for our students and families. Little side note, just for fun, the weatherman, as we come back to school, decided to tell us there might be snow in the forecast in the next week or so. So anyone out there, we can see what happens there. But with that said, I'll jump into my report and quickly, probably the most important part of my report today, a lot of it's announcement based and update based, but part of it has to do with an update with our last board meeting, which was on December 12th. And if you remember, we had students and individuals that came to testify to share information around a request related to a prayer room at the high school. And specifically, I have a little bit of update. Again, to be totally transparent here, board meeting, week back. So we're still working on it, but I want you to know we are working on it, and I can give you some updates since December 12th. My understanding is actually there was a meeting all the way back, a little bit of a heads up, on November 13th with one of our assistant principals and students, or possibly the whole MSU group, but definitely the advisor, students. And then from there, on November 25th, our administrator, one of our assistant principals, actually visited with Nicole, went to Madison to look. They actually have a prayer room or a meditation room to kind of explore and learn about it. They also did a webinar or FaceTime call with Wilson High School. That was on December 2nd. And then there was also, and it's in this one, communication with the Muslim Educational Trust, just talking about the process, making sure we were learning about it and understanding it. So I just want to share, or can share with the board, that there has been continued conversations, and I believe even yesterday or today, Mr. Flores, Assistant Principal Flores, met with either, again, the MSU group or the leadership of the student union, so one or the other. Kind of following up, right? That's where we're at right now, is just going through the process. With that said, there are still some questions and concerns, and the number one being space. Right now, coming and saying we would like to add either a meditation room, maybe a wellness room, a prayer room, how that plays out. There's not a lot of space in our high school, so trying to navigate that is one concern. And both Wilson and Madison had places that were right by an office, so there were staff always there that could help supervise, because that's another question that we're navigating, is how do we help supervise that space? So that's another one. And then just the process in general, right? There, I believe I heard in the presentation, and I haven't had the privilege to meet with the group yet, but through Orlando, that there, is it a prayer room or is it a meditation room? Because if it's a prayer room, there are some questions under what's called the Lemon test for civil rights and separation of school or government, state, and church. Doesn't mean it can't be done. There's just navigation around it, versus a wellness center or meditation. There aren't those restrictions. So there's just those pieces we're navigating right now, I guess, is what I'm sharing. And again, I know there was a meeting. I haven't got an update from Mr. Flores about what the meeting was, but it's kind of one step at a time. I do know the last, I believe, 2 years, again, some of this I'm shooting a little bit here, but last 2 years we've provided a prayer room, gone out of the way to make it happen during Ramadan, to make sure there was a prayer room during Ramadan, but that's not what this request is. This request is all year long, every day, kind of a thing. So they are definitely working on Ramadan at this point, but they're also working on this. So I just wanted to, I don't think this is the end report for this. I think the board's going to be, I'm guessing the board's going to be interested in closure to this. I don't have that yet, so that's where we're at right now. Question? Do you have a question? You bet.
Yeah, just as a Muslim on the school board, I appreciate you taking this seriously. I am also happy to be a resource and to be involved in the conversation.
Thank you. We'll take you up on that. And then the few others are, again, more announcements, but things I think the board would be interested in. I will definitely follow up in writing as well, just so you have a record of it. Like, for example, this one, I had a connection, an introduction. Earl Blumenauer's office has a new field rep. Her name's Molly Hogan. So I'll send you her number. Her and I will be connecting and kind of talking about needs in our district and community, but I'm assuming the district board would be interested in that as well. I've had the opportunity to have a conversation offline a little bit, but I wanted to remind the board that we are looking at a safety audit and going through a safety audit through our entire district. And just kind of wanted to share a little bit, because some people get really, well, what's safety? What are we looking at? And it's everything from communication, both inside of the building, outside of the building, support and training, crime prevention, control point obstacles, landscaping, deterrence, access control. So that's our key cards, how we get in, not vestibules, identification, video. We heard testimony earlier about video, intrusion alarms, proximities, protocol supports, just giving you ideas. But then it also goes into emergency operation plans, threat and risk assessments, harassment and intimidation, bullying, suicide prevention, sexual misconduct prevention plan, and it goes on. I mean, I could show you, there's a number, but the bottom line, it's a very thorough audit to take a look at where we're at as a district and what direction might we need to go to invest to make sure that we're keeping anyone that's inside of our buildings, outside of our buildings, and anywhere within our community near our buildings safe and secure. So very interested in getting the results to the safety audit and sharing it with the board and talking about what actions we need to take related to that. Yeah, please. Aaron.
Would that include the cameras that that someone brought up earlier tonight?
That would definitely include our camera system we currently have. How current is it? Does it work? All of that. Yes, definitely. On top of that, just wanted to remind the board and our community that we do have 2 openings for our budget committee, and Dan will be posting the process for that tomorrow. So I won't go into details about that, but it will be online. It will be on our website. And again, I'll pause here. I don't know if anyone wants to add anything. If not, that's fine, but just kind of a heads up there. So student success update, I pretty much shared that every board meeting from here on out, there's going to be some sort of update. Not a lot of new information right now. We are waiting for the actual template around budgeting. We haven't received that yet, so it's still unofficial on the fundings we will receive. Where we're at as a district is we're currently taking the initial feedback we have from data. So when it comes to the survey on the broad strokes, we know exactly what the data says there. When it comes to the feedback at the Your Voice Matters, we have specific feedback there. But on top of that, there's a number of comments. If you remember, I shared about 289 pages of comments or whatever it was. Anyway, long story short, that's gone out. The MESD has resources through the Student Success Act to help us translate that data. We should be getting our first report tomorrow. I'm very excited about that. And then we also have partnered with U of P, who has a data research center who's taken our data and helping us interpret it as well. But with that said, again, we have some broad points, and literally today as a cabinet, we started with the process of what does a shell look like? How could we invest? And ultimately, good time to share a reminder, we changed our board workshop, so we're looking at January 28th now. And January 28th, I'm hoping, I need to get it approved by board leadership, that the steps, that workshop will be around the Student Success Act, in which we can share the data and a little bit of a shell of a plan. It won't be a total plan yet, that's not until February, but hopefully we can give you some ideas of, based on the data, this is the direction we're going. Another one just real quick, tomorrow we have a legislative breakfast. Annually, superintendents in the region meet with our electives. MESD's hosting that tomorrow. It's an opportunity for us to just talk about the short session, talk about lobbying, talk about a few things. For example, I've been appointed to talk about the mandatory subject of bargaining around class size. So class size being mandatory subject of bargaining, and I'm going to be talking about how that would be a very difficult situation for our district and that there's other ways to work with class size. So examples like that is the idea. And then finally, last, before I get into kind of an exciting announcement, this is just a very positive, fun, but also roll up your sleeve, a lot of hard work. Candy and I and Donna had the opportunity to meet with our staff of Color Affinity Group yesterday, and it was just a great discussion, great opportunity, and ultimately the focus of that meeting was talking about our district hiring plan and our goals around diversifying our workforce. And really they came to the table saying, can we help? We want to help. So it's pretty exciting. Yeah, pretty exciting. And we ended there with a lot more work, and we also ended there with more meetings, but it's good work. It's the right work, and we're pretty excited about it. So the last thing, if you will indulge me, I get the privilege of recognizing that this month is our official board recognition month, and it's an opportunity for us to recognize and thank all of our board members for countless hours of volunteer service, ultimately giving back to the community, right? Ultimately taking time out of your lives to make sure that our district is run appropriately, and ultimately the bottom line is that in our classrooms every day, our kids are safe, welcome, supported, challenged, and they truly have an identity in our school. And I feel privileged, proud. In our cabinet, we talk often about the board, and we're very fortunate to have a board that truly takes this responsibility seriously, and I want to thank you. So I'm going to wait and read the proclamation at the end. I am going to read the proclamation, but I want to recognize and thank, if you didn't see, you have a new beverage holder. I don't know, what do we call those? Tumblers? Tumbler, yeah. But they are, yeah, it's and I'm supposed to point out there are treats in it, some treats inside of it. Yeah, so, you gotta wait, secrets. Someone might already got into them, they cheated a little bit, but seriously, thank you. There's also an ornament in front that was actually made from our makerspace that is individualized. Unfortunately, we had a little error, so one of our board members is getting theirs a little bit after. We've already talked about it, and someone else gets two, yes. So, yeah, exactly. So we will take care of that. And then finally, there's a certificate, obviously, to say thank you. And I would ask, as we end the board meeting today, if you would possibly indulge me to get together and we could take a picture with you holding your certificates. We'd like to post that and kind of go from there. With that said, if you'll stick with me, I'd like to... Oh, please, Aaron, go. You bet. No, please. Oh, yeah.
Along the same vein, Ventura Park Elementary presented the board with a thank you basket that they put together and asked me to bring it in tonight, and I just wanted to... We can divvy it up later, so it's really nice. Yeah.
I'd watch him. What's divvied up mean? Whose car is it going in? Yeah.
We do have an equity policy.
Yeah, exactly. So the State of Oregon Proclamation, Office of the Governor. Whereas access to high-quality public education gives every Oregon student the opportunity for lifelong success, contributing to Oregon's quality of life and economic prosperity. And whereas every student can learn and succeed, especially when given the opportunities they deserve to develop the knowledge and skills to achieve their full potential. And whereas Oregon's education system has the mission of fully welcoming every child from every background across our diverse state and supporting their learning and development. And whereas the leadership of locally elected school boards, in close partnership with the educators, students, families, and communities they serve, fosters the engagement, care, and resiliency that leads to equitable achievement for all students. And whereas board members are critical in establishing the inclusive expectations, culture, and conditions that allow for quality teaching and learning. And whereas the committed people who serve on the boards of Oregon's 197 school districts and the #1 school district, David Douglas, 19 education service district, and 17 community colleges deserve recognition and thanks for their dedication to the education needs of the students of Oregon. So it then goes into the governor actually basically therefore, but basically what she says is this is School Board Recognition Month. So thank you all for your service and all you do every day. We really do appreciate it. And that is my report tonight. That's all I have.
Thank you so much. All right. Next, we have the Division 22 Standards presentation and action item presented by Brooke O'Neill.
Thank you. And before we get started with that, I also want to acknowledge at your desks you have a Scott's Readers poster, and true to form in the spirit of giving back to our community, this is the vision of Lon Morris, who is one of our high school basketball coaches, of how do our high school athletes and student leadership give back to our own David Douglas community. So this is all about promoting literacy and linking our high school students with our elementary students. And so it's a pretty cool project, and I want to invite you on January 24th. Starting at 6:30, doors will open, but this is for our second graders. Our high school athletes and leadership went and visited every second grade classroom on their day off from school. They got up early, they came to the school, they practiced their script, we divvied them out, they went to every second grade classroom and they talked about the importance of reading. They invited them to their basketball game where they will get to come to the game. They will be high-fived, they'll be wearing t-shirts, they will be cheering them on. The kids will get to go down to the court where they'll be high-fived. They get a backpack. We have a lot of donations. They get a backpack with at least 6 books. They get an activity book that was developed by Lindsay DeFazio over there, so she's part of our planning committee. They get a I'm a Scott's Reader t-shirt, and so it's a really cool, and they've done a lot of promotion, one of this being the poster, so that's for you as well. So please join us if you can.
Brooke, will you share the story about the books on the cover? The difference between the poster last year and this year?
Well, if you look really closely at last year's poster, last year was our first year, so we learned a lot about it. And so when it came time to do the picture, they just grabbed books off the high school library shelf. So if you look, you might see like an encyclopedia, an atlas. So this year, with our district librarians, we were able to say, what is your favorite book as a kid? And so she made sure to go and pull their favorite books, and so those are all children's books, so that's very intentional. So that was awesome. And that picture was taken 3 or 4 different times on 3 or 4 different days. So because there were a couple other little glitches, so it's a labor of love, definitely. So yeah, so please join us for that. So, okay, well, now getting into as equally as exciting Division 22. I want to make sure. So, for our new board members, just what is Division 22? Every year, we engage in a review of the administrative rules contained in OAR chapters. And what this does for us, and every school district in the state has to do this, it's an opportunity for us to demonstrate compliance with the standards that have been set forth by the State Board of Education. You know, it allows us to reflect on all of the laws and how are we addressing them. It also allows us to inform you and the community if there's been any changes that might pull us out of compliance. These laws are continually updated and there's changes and there's lots of moving parts to them. So it does require that annual review. This year, what I'm presenting to you now is compliance for last year. So we're always doing the year previous. So we're really looking at the 1920 school year. And also it's about reciprocal accountability between the districts, every district in Oregon, and the Department of Education. So how we work together on that. So the timeline that's been set forth with us is by February 1st each year, districts report to the school board our compliance with all Division 22 standards. Again, this report is for the 18-19 school year. So an action item for you tonight is to acknowledge receipt of this report because we will need to upload the board minutes to show that we've discussed it. So by February 1st, we will report this presentation along with the actual that you have in your packet to our website, so anybody on the community can come in and look with that as well. And then there is an additional report that we complete for purposes, our accountability purposes for the Oregon Department of Education, and we will send that to them by February 15th. So what process do we go through? I think it's really important to share that with you to determine our compliance and what that looks like. So it begins at the cabinet level. We get notification from Oregon Department of Education, usually early December, about this process. We meet as a cabinet. We do a big picture overview of all of the standards, and we divide them up amongst the superintendent, assistant superintendent, and all of the cabinet directors for areas that we oversee. And then we each do a deeper review of everything. There's a lot of reading involved with that. So we may go back and talk to personnel that we work with. For example, one area for me was talented and gifted. I meet with our talented and gifted coordinator. We go through everything to make sure we're in compliance. What do we need to focus on? We just outline our current practice against the rule just to see where we are. And then new this year, what we did is we had a select standards that we pulled out, and we actually asked our schools to do the same thing. So each principal went through, and they also, it ranged anywhere from 4 standards to 6 standards, I think, at the high school, where they went through and they read and they talked about, did a deeper review. Okay, is my building in alignment with this practice as well? So just as another layer, we added that. Then we come back and we discuss and we go through them one by one and we talk about our overall compliance. So if we are deemed out of compliance, what needs to happen there is we provide an explanation in our report to you and to the state as to what component, what part of the OAR are we out of compliance, and why is that? There may be many reasons why we might be out of compliance. And then we would provide a description of our proposed corrective action to say, how are we going to be compliant? And we have until the beginning of the following school year to do that. So that is the process that we go through each year. So this year there were 52 standards that we reviewed. You did get last year's report in your packet. My apologies about that. So last year you will notice there were 50 standards. There were 2 new ones added this year. And we are in compliance with all 52 of the standards. So just so our community can see what this looks like, you can see the standards range anywhere from diploma requirements to a lot of assessment questions to PE data, asbestos management, so there's quite a range there. The 2 that are highlighted yellow, essential skills for English language learners and anabolic steroids and performance-enhancing substances, were new this year. That's why I highlighted, just to show that we didn't have to rate ourselves on those last year. So again, here's the rest in continuation with the 52 standards. This presentation, again, will be posted on our website along with this report, along with a link. Again, all of these are hyperlinks, and there will be a link to anybody who wants to go and read any of those standards. I think one thing that's really exciting that hasn't happened in a really long time is that this spring ODE is going to be doing a complete review of all of the Division 22 OARs. So there may be some changes next year to see what that looks like. We used to report on maybe 5 or 6 a year. In the last while, we've done like quite a few more. So anyway, that's our process, and I don't know if there's any questions.
It's done in-house. Is there ever a time when an outside agency comes in to examine, to review, to see if we're in compliance, or is it just we just review ourselves?
Yeah, it's all been in-house about what is our current practice and how do we meet that, yes.
Okay, and the state doesn't have any other requirements around that?
They don't, no. Like years ago, they used to actually come and visit school districts and kind of like do an audit. But now the process is that it's done at the local level, and then we just submit a report.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Do you have anything? Yes. Yes. So we, let's see. Is there a motion to acknowledge the receipt of the Division 22 standards from 2018-2019?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Oh, shoot, I just moved my agenda. All right. The next item is the PERS Incentive Funds update by Pat.
Yes. So I wasn't lucky enough to get Carol Samuels here tonight. She had a prior engagement, so I do apologize for that. But I wanted to bring the some information back to you. Last month, one of the questions posed was whether we could use proceeds should we sell the Deerdorf property and deposit those and receive the matching payment from the PERS Employer Incentive Fund. And yes, we could do that. Those bonds actually just retired, and so we would not be obligated to hold those and use those for a specific purpose. We could also budget for this in our next budget cycle. That is an option. Of course, that takes away from operations, and that would have to come out of general fund. I had an idea. I ran it past the auditors, and they nixed it. So I'm not offering that idea tonight. But I did want to bring to your attention, we do need to fill out an application if we want to pursue this. In that application, we do have to say the amount of payment that we would be submitting and when the payment would be received. A guarantee that the funds are not borrowed, i.e. we haven't gone out for a PERS bond or a loan of some sort. The date on which the amount will be used to offset the PERS rate. And so we can choose to select the date or we can just let it roll into the next rate calculation. So one of the things, let's see here, we would have to open a second site account with PERS, which would incur some small fees for that. And they would do an actuarial analysis if we wanted to put it against the rate earlier than the next rate calculation, if that makes sense, because they're going to have to do some work, so we're going to have to pay them to do that. In this, I put in a recommendation that you plan for a $4.45 million contribution towards the site account and put in an application now that would generate a little over $1 million matching contribution. I do want to make sure that you're aware that the application, if we put it in, does not commit us to actually following through with that. We could do a lesser amount, or we could decide not to do it at all. But this, by putting in the application, we actually guarantee, or we don't guarantee, we put ourselves on the wait list for the possible match.
And when would we know whether or not we would need, or like once we get approved off the wait list and when we would need to
So
disperse the
once we got
funds?
approved, because I pulled this number, I didn't pull it quite out of thin air, but I pulled the number from the value of the Deerdorf property, should we sell it. So that's where I came up with the 4.45 million. We would, I would probably pick the date far enough out for a closure of a sale. So I would probably look at the spring of 2021. And so by that time is when we would have to let them know that, no, we're not going to, or, okay? Are we interested in
Any other
pursuing?
questions?
You know, it seems like it's kind of a no-brainer, because if we decide something happens where we don't want to follow through, we just don't follow through.
Yeah, I agree.
So ultimately, at this point, it definitely is, but I mean, the conversation is at some point really, because as you guys know, we brought experts in to talk about, and we know that previously we got burned on a program like this, right? And at that time, there was a lot of resistance from the board. This program's just different enough that we didn't want to just ignore that. We wanted to make sure we brought it before the board. There are some changes to it, and make sure we're considering it. I absolutely agree with the board saying, ultimately, at this point, at least we get in line, and then before we have to make any decisions. But at some point, we will have to, because and the reason I'm saying is my understanding, there's still reservations across the board on this. Yeah. So I guess my point is if there is a need for more reporting, information, we don't have to wait until that time as well, because when that time comes, it might need to be kind of a fast and furious versus doing some research up front. So just something to think about as we move forward.
So is there any risk at all in doing the application? It sounds like we can reduce how much we give. or
Correct.
say
The
no
application
thanks.
has no risk. Once you put the money in the side account,
That's where the risk
it's,
is.
yep, so that's where the risk is. It goes into the side account. We don't get to pull it back out at any time. It goes in there, it stays in there. And again, it's at market risk. And so as a reminder, we lost, I think, between 10 and $11 million in a year. Out of 37 for when we did the PERS bond, it went down, I think, a little over $1 million, and then nearly $10 million the following year. And that was because of the way the markets were at the time. It was just bad timing on the markets.
I remain very skeptical and very worried about the situation internationally and domestically. However, this is a small drop in the bucket compared to the PERS bill that's coming due. And I would like to not have us leave money on the table, even if it's only $1 million. And I reserve the right to change my mind later.
That's what's nice. It sounds like we can change our mind later.
Is there anything else you need from us? Do we need to take a vote on this, or is this enough direction for you to move forward?
That's enough direction. I'll go ahead and put in an application, and then once we do that, we may come back if we haven't gotten any, which I haven't heard anything on the property at this time. But if we haven't, that may be something that we look forward to maybe putting in the budget for next year, dependent upon where we're at.
Okay. Thank you. All right, we have Candy Wallace next. This is the approval of our school board calendar for 2020-2021.
Yes, it's hard to believe that we're talking about 2020-21, but we are. So in your packets, you have a proposed calendar for next school year, and this is the master calendar, so it's more of a shell. This calendar shows the start days. So in this case, we're proposing August 31st as a start date for staff, and then you can see it at the end, the last date being for staff on the 18th of June. It also shows winter break, the holidays, spring break as well. The leveled calendars, so the elementary, the middle, the high, and so on, those come after this. And they'll be developed based on the adopted master calendar. So that's not what we have tonight, just the master. This master informally, it looks similar to many of our neighboring districts and what they're considering, but they haven't been adopted yet. That's why I say it informally. And it also looks really similar to the calendar that we have this year and the master calendar from the previous year. So I'm happy to answer questions if you have them. Otherwise, I'll turn them back over to our board chair for your consideration.
Question, and I apologize to Frida, who's probably heard 30 years of this, but can you remind me how snow days are calculated into this? Does that come at the actual school level calendar after this, or?
Right. So what's calculated into this is not necessarily days. We have instructional hours. So, for example, at elementary, we have to have 900 instructional hours, and then high school is 990 and up. So we just make sure that we have those bare minimum, but we, just so you know, we're over that with this master calendar. So to say they're sort of built in, they sort of are, but that's not what we really consider when we're developing this.
It's kind of a misnomer, because it used to be in the calendar you would build in snow days. It was allowed to do that, and that's no more. They took that away. Actually, part of the Division 22 standards is that we have to have so many minutes, just like Candy said. So what this shows is we do meet the minutes. If we have a snow day, then we just subtract the minutes. Right. And if we have another snow day, we subtract the minutes. And then if we were to go below the amount of minutes, then we have to go back to ODE and say, hey, we approved Division 22 standards saying we met this 990, now we do not. And then it just depends on, for example, 2 years ago that occurred. Remember the big 2-3, the big snowstorm, and the entire region was out, and in which case ODE gave kind of a waiver. They kind of gave everyone a waiver in the state. If you remember, Hood River was closed almost a month and a half. They got a different waiver and didn't have to make. So that's the process now, so it's changed.
And actually in the past, we've even just tried to find the time within the days off that we've had to make up for that as well, if we had to, so.
Are we putting, I know last year because of the problem of that big snowstorm, and we chose not to go over the week in June. Last time we kind of gave notice that this is kind of a carryover.
Yeah, and
in case.
Yes, and we didn't put that on here, but we will again, so that all staff are aware. Hold on to those last 5 days or in June, because if we do go way below our instructional minutes and have to make up those days, those will be it.
Any other questions or comments? Go ahead.
I'm just trying to remember, is there a reason why we do hours as opposed to days?
That's the guidance that we're given by the state, and I believe it's in law around the minutes that are required. We don't determine that.
Okay.
Anything else from folks? Okay, all right, well, this is an action item, so is there a motion to approve the school calendar for 2020-2021?
Move to approve the David Douglas School District Master Calendar 2021.
Second.
Okay, discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Awesome. And then the last item, well, not the last item, never mind. Just kidding. Second to last item is the conversation around the start time of school board meetings. Erin will be presenting this, but just to flag for folks, this was a question that came to board leadership. I think we had maybe briefly mentioned it at some point in the past, and Erin wanted to bring it up again. So take it away.
Hi. So in the last few months that I've been on the board, just recently actually, and for about the year that I was coming to meetings before I was on the board, I noticed that necessarily our meetings tend to go pretty late sometimes. Like tonight, it's going to definitely crest 9 o'clock, and I don't do my best thinking after 9. Usually I'm pretty punch drunk by the time I get out of here. And I'm just wondering if we ever, I'm assuming we've had a conversation before about why we start our meetings at 7 instead of earlier in the night. I know there's some barriers for me personally due to traffic and just, trying to shape my work schedule around the meetings, getting out a little bit earlier. But I did want to raise the conversation just because it seems like it would have been a prudent thing to bump it, a little bit earlier. Just to start a dialogue around it tonight.
gonna laugh because he says we start ending late, and I can remember we used to start at 7:30, had the meeting, had executive session, and often we're here till 11 or 12 o'clock at night. So to me, it seems early. But I have to say, I'm flexible no matter what. But I know there's people who work who aren't as flexible because of having to get there, and that's what we really have to consider as those of you that have to come from work to a meeting.
I mean, at the moment, I have a very flexible schedule. So yeah, I would just say depending on folks that have 9 to 5 jobs and if it's on the other side and being able to get here.
I mean, mine is get home from work. Some of us work downtown, fighting traffic to get back here. I could do it. I would just have to make sure I left work earlier than what I normally would. Normally I get home from work at 6, and to get, dinner, and because boy, you better eat before that meeting that gets over at 11, right? To get all that done, it's a little challenge, and to get kids fed and everything. So, but next year I won't have that problem. So, I know. Yeah. So for me, it would just be leaving work earlier, which I could do most times.
I'm pretty flexible.
I guess I want to clarify, was the question about these particular people, this particular board, or in general? Because whereas it may be fine for us presently, would that be prohibitive going forward to who comes onto the board, people who don't have the privilege of working in jobs where they can decide to leave earlier, like they have set hours, and does that become a hindrance? Just something to think about.
Well, the start times are always something that we can decide to change, and so if there are other folks who come on who need an adjustment, I think board leadership and the board would want to make sure we're accommodating them, for sure. Just absolutely. Yeah.
The only other thought that has come up is, we've actually heard testimony about board meetings being accessible to people who have 9 to 5 jobs, and I remember that being part of the calculation. So I'm wondering how that would fit in. But again, we can decide have shorter agendas, I guess, too. We try, I think. Yeah. Try. There's a lot to do, but and I know that in the past there's also been some board meetings are business and some are dealing with presentations, so instead of a workshop. So there's lots of configurations that I know this board has tried in the past. But I hear you that it's pretty late. It usually is.
You also have to consider if you're going to have exec session before. So say you want to start the meeting at 6:30, that means your exec session is going to be at 6. So you need to be able to, it's not just the meeting, it's the exec session as well.
And we actually, I think recently, recent to me, I guess, but the latest change in time was that we changed the exec session. Actually, it used to be at 6, and then we moved it to 6:30, which actually is more helpful for me, even though I feel like I still send Ken too many texts of I'm running late, even still, just because of the traffic. And I think to second a lot of you who have mentioned that, I also work downtown, and I think really the earliest that I can get here is 6:30 for exec. So I think it would be a struggle for me, and I've been living in Outer East Portland now for about almost 9 years, and I definitely have seen every year it's just getting longer and longer and longer for me to get out here where I live. And so I do worry about that, and like Christine said, making sure my kiddo's got food and everything she needs before I can leave. I think the issue, it sounds like, that I think is a fair one that you bring up is about the overall length of the meetings, and necessarily so much about the start time, perhaps, of the meeting. And like Stephanie said, I think we definitely do try to make sure that, you know, the agendas are not super, super long. That being said, you know, we always have questions, and I think, you know, this is something that we all really care about and want to have, you know, time to be able to review and ask questions and have discussion on. So, yeah, I think we can continue to figure out how to best prioritize items so that it's not so, so dense every time.
Thank you. And I want to say I really appreciate everyone's input and for your time too. Thank you.
So obviously we serve at the will, so that's not what I'm saying something. One thing we could do if the board was interested, and I don't know if this helps at all, but we could say the board meeting, go back to the board meeting starts at 6:30, and then exec session, you know, because exec session is really only when needed, right? And there might be times when it's not needed. So my point is if the board ever wanted to consider that, they could look at, hey, 6:30 start time, and then, you know, obviously when we need exec session, we need it, and if we don't, we don't. So just food for thought.
And in the past, we usually had the exec session after the meeting, not before the meeting. So if it ran a little over, you weren't worried about butting up to the meeting time.
Or assumably trying to make decisions after a certain time, you know, or at least public decisions. At the beginning, yeah.
Yeah, that is a good idea. Because I know, I mean, I get tired too. You've seen me struggling at 11 o'clock, you know, 11:30 after 13, 14-hour days and stuff.
I imagine how the cabinet feels just listening to hours of people talking. Hard for you.
Okay, well, we'll take that into consideration. Maybe we can have a conversation about it at our next agenda setting.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Awesome, thank you. All right, and the last item is a panel of board members. This will be from our policy committee, Frida, Aaron, and Donna. This is a first reading. Do I have to read all of these? Okay, first reading of these policies listed here. Frida, Aaron, and Donna?
Well, it's basically, I gave my input so that things were changed before they came to you. So but I think Aaron had a question on the optional policies, the new policies.
Yeah, thank you. Reading through the optional policies, there's some language that directs the school, or our schools, to give information to non-custodial parents or to provide non-custodial parents access to their students' information. Also, authorizing the schools to contact, if we have one parent who's has sole custody of their children, authorizing the school to call the parent who doesn't have custody of the children if that parent who does have sole custody can't be reached. But also saying that it's on the parent to bring something from the courts if they're not comfortable with that parent being contacted. And I've just, I know it's odd, but I've got a lot of personal experience with friends and relatives who have spent a lot of time and money trying to keep their kids out of really dangerous circumstances by soliciting for sole custody through the courts, and it's kind of a lengthy process. And so it seems like a challenging notion for me to say, oh, well, we can't reach that parent. Let's call the parent that they spent all this time and money and emotional energy trying to keep their kids from, and have them come pick their kids up from school during this emergency situation. And if this is an optional policy, I'm not sure if it's kind of a, good for the district, because we don't know that this parent doesn't have custody of their children, and if we accidentally contact them, then it's covered in policy. But otherwise, if this is optional, I would probably vote not to include it in our policy for those reasons.
But procedurally, this is basically what we do, isn't it? And I know what you're talking about, but usually when there's a split, there's a parenting plan, and at the minimum, they can submit the parenting plan. My son had to do it so he could get his son's grades. He had joint custody, but he was out of state. But he had to submit his parenting plan so they could see he could make medical decisions. He could do that. So in the case of a divorce, there's usually a parenting plan that parent should have. The court order is something different when they get more issues. But if they have sole custody, they've gone through the process.
Yeah.
So I think it just gives us some definition of what we're having to do already.
Yeah, but it kind of says that if the parent who doesn't have sole custody, this is the way I'm reading it. So if I have sole custody of my kid, it's saying that the person who doesn't have any custody rights can get their student records, and if there's an emergency, they could be released to them. And is that what it says? Because that's the way I'm reading it. So I don't know. Maybe maybe I have hit my almost 9 p.m. and I can't think anymore. And also, I will preface that with I do have a cold, so maybe my brain's not working. But
I mean, that's how I'm reading it. As
it
well,
reads like
You're talking about the very first paragraph. An
Yeah.
order of sole custody on the part of one parent shall not deprive
the other parent of the following authority as it relates to receiving and
That's correct.
inspecting their students' records.
That's how I'm
So
reading
if somebody has sole custody, there's usually a good reason for that. And so how would a person who had sole custody block the other person from getting this stuff? They have to present a court order saying that person can't see these things?
That's correct. So what would happen would be, what we're talking about is what's in the system.
Okay.
So when a parent comes and registers their student, they would notify, I'm the sole custodian, but here's also communication for the parent. You can't, right, it's in the system that way.
Okay.
So what we're talking about, I understand what you're saying, and it is optional. So if we don't want it, just what we have right now is when it's in the system, typically they would tell us you are not to contact this parent. They're not to be in there. They're not even in the system, right? Or, yes, I'm sole custody, but it is okay if you call mom or dad, kind of as an emergency contact. So the process. So it's really how it's listed in the system and how it's put within the system, and or here's the court order, no. And we have it go the other way as well. We have it, I'm registering my son, my daughter, here it is, and then 2 weeks later, a parent comes in and says, no, look, I'm a parent as well. My name needs to be on there. So it kind of goes both ways depending on the situation, unless there's something from the court that says, no, you kind of lost your right to be a parent. That's not working.
I mean, I just had an experience with a friend in college who was in an abusive family, and his father didn't have custody at all, and somehow the university released that he was a student there, and that became a big issue. And he wasn't even a minor anymore, but so I just want to make sure that we're covered in cases, especially when there could be some child abuse going on, and they don't want that parent to have access.
And I would also question the notion that everyone does have a parenting plan written down or has been through the courts. And I'm thinking particularly of our students from other communities and cultures where that is not the norm, where some of these things happen at the mosque and is like between. I just think that there's some assumptions in this policy about what's actually on paper, and then to think, well, now you have to go to your partner and somehow come up with a parenting plan without a resource or without interpreting that then goes to the school. I think that there is an assumption in this policy that that really puts a high burden on our family, like on parents. I would also advocate that we don't adopt it.
I'm okay either way. I just have dealt with someone who's had to use his parenting plan to get his kids' report cards and stuff. But we have to have procedures around it. So often you make the policy so the procedures follow the policy, and instead of, basically it's what's in the system.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and we aren't bringing, just so you know, we aren't bringing this policy from the district saying we need this policy. That's not the case at all. This came from OSBA as an optional policy, and we basically, anything OSBA sends us, we give to the board for consideration. We don't vet them. We share everything. So just so you know, I haven't got any feedback that we need this policy. That's not why it's there. So if the board determines it's not needed, it's not needed. But there is a process in place that there is responsibilities, there's rights, there's certain responsibilities we have around communication. There's times where, no, I do not want you to communicate with my spouse. And sorry, we have to. We have an obligation. So again, it goes both ways, to be quite honest, in the process. And typically what we try to do is to try to get that taken care of during registration and get all the documentation, get the emergency contacts, who's the point, and how it all plays out. But that changes as well, to be quite honest.
That is a question I had. So, in the case of my kids who are going to a 5-year school, or 6 years actually, I know we provide a lot of this information when they're initially registered, but say they're in 3rd grade and that custody status changes, then I'm guessing it's on the ownership of the parent to bring that paperwork to the school anyway and let them know what's happening.
And everybody gets at least an update, a chance to a paper form, and they're sent home at the beginning of the school year to update that information, the part of that packet. And even on the high school level, we get a packet mailed to home, and it has that information form in there. We're required to fill it out, make any changes, and then drop it off on one of the fabulous high school registration circus zoo days. So, yeah. So, I mean, people do get a chance at least yearly to look at that, even if they don't go into parent view, because you can also make some changes in parent view.
Can I ask a question though? Like, if we have practices, right? And I assume that they aren't ARs because they're not associated with policy, or so right now we have nothing that codifies our practices.
Other than law, other than FERPA.
Right, just following the law. Okay, all right. I'll have to think about this one.
That's why it's a first reading.
Yeah, right.
If you guys decide it isn't something you want in policy, we just pull it and it's not in the second reading.
Well, I mean, there's also, this happened because someone somewhere in some district got sued, right? So we should also think, usually, or there's a change in policy at the state level or whatever.
I think there's a lot more cases of divorces than at one time, and issues, so that it needs more clarification. I know within the system you can put who you want, because I'm my granddaughter's contact, because I'm closer than either of her parents where they work. So I'm often the one they call because I'm the closest and stuff. So, so you can do those kind of things. But I understand about no formal parenting plan or no formal marriage or divorce and those kind of things. So you don't have those.
Not legal. Yeah. It is formal, quite formal. Yeah. Okay, well, I'm going to use my phone a friend and probably talk to Kyle after this. But he's in the back, and I'm like, gosh, I miss his wonkiness. Anyway, thank you.
I just had a question regarding the annual letter that goes out to either update your emergency contacts and whatnot. Is that available in our 5 languages?
Yeah, we translate the registration letter. Do we, Kelly? The first one that goes out? Okay. The registration is translated, but when we do the annual verification form, it's not. Okay. No, it's not.
That would be probably a good idea. And maybe specifying in a way of, we need this every year to make sure that your child is safe and we know what's happening. To have that in all the different languages.
Did you have a comment, John? John actually is very...
So can we talk about the other policies now? Yeah, specifically the individual board members' authority and responsibilities. I know that on January 1st, we all became mandatory reporters. Yes. And is that reflected anywhere? I'm not saying it has to be in this, but maybe it goes here. I don't know, but it seems like it is an individual board member's responsibility now as a mandatory reporter. So do we need to put that in this policy, or do we just say, oh, Oregon law says it's so that's good enough?
I believe it's actually in the policy around mandatory reporting. I think we've already updated, but I'll look and see,
Okay.
Christine. Yeah, other than my email to you and the change, but I believe in the actual, there's a policy around.
Okay.
I think it's in there, but we
Okay.
will check and get back
It
to you.
just seems like, us being told because it just took effect is one thing, but 3 years from now, new
Yeah.
board members.
No, that's fair.
It would be good if they had.
Yeah.
I mean, as they read through the giant, thick
Well,
thing
we
of
have a board
policies.
handbook too that we'll add it to that. But again, the more places it can live, the better.
Okay.
Any other questions on any of the other items? Thank you so much for already putting the red line version in front of us. It's really helpful. I know you spent a lot of time doing that, so thank you. It's really helpful.
I'm sorry, they've kind of put in some of the changes, and then if we disagree is what we're usually doing.
Yeah, that's fine. Awesome. All right, well, that was, I just lost my agenda, but that was the last item. So, if there are no other comments, we are adjourning here at 9:08. Thank you, everybody.